I joked he was my loyal puppy at the party. His response made me eat my words. Hello, Reddit. My name is Emma, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married to my husband, Nick, for about 11 years now, and we have 3 beautiful kids together. I'm the chief editor at a publishing company, and I've worked there for almost all my life. I got into the company immediately after finishing school. My husband, Nick, works as a technologist in a big company. We're not very rich, but we are very much comfortable, and we own our own house. We can afford everything we need without struggling too hard to get it. I'm not trying to brag. All I'm saying is that we didn't want anything, and that brings me back to the whole reason I'm here. I cheated on my husband of 11 years, and it was not because of money or fame. It was because I'm greedy and I was selfish, and I think I must be the most unsatisfied wife in the whole world. I cannot say that Nick doesn't have his own faults. He's not perfect or anything like that, but he tries... Scratch that. He tried his darn hardest to make things between us work, but I guess I wasn't even trying. Not at all. And me not trying at all ruined everything for us, and I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I admit that cheating should not have been what I resorted to. But at that point, that was the only thing I thought would make me happy. And it did for a while. Well, until it didn't. Everything had come crashing down that horrible day, and now I really don't know where I stand with everything. I shouldn't have said that. I was only just joking. I just wanted to be heard, and I said the wrongest thing, and now it has ruined my life. At the party organized by my husband's closest friend, Sam, I had wanted to just be the fun one, and I made jokes. Everyone laughed. I was pleased that I was able to make everyone laugh, so I continued, just until I made mention of something stupid. And now it's been 3 days since that event that ruined my life. Or shall I say I ruined it myself? If I hadn't said anything about him being a loyal puppy, he would have kept the secret all to himself. He must have known from the beginning. The first time I had sex with Wills, and I had come home smelling of another man's perfume, and when he had asked me why I smelled differently, I told him I hugged some people at work, and Nick had believed me without doubting, or so I thought. I met Nick through his close friend, Sam. Because of his line of work, I mean Sam, who is a lawyer, he had to know a lot of people because he worked with evidence and people most times. We met because of a case that happened at work back then when his client had been suing the company I work for breach of contract. Sam had met me to ask questions and find out the truth, which had really been reversed. The client had been the one to breach the contract, and the company decided not to work with him anymore. So Sam, after finding out the truth, had dropped the case because he apparently couldn't afford to lose an already losing case. That's how Sam and I became acquaintances. And we had met one day at the bar coincidentally when I was out with my friends for a girls' night. And he had been there too with Nick. He introduced us to each other, and Nick and I were clearly interested in each other from the beginning, so we kicked things off from there. Nick and I were so passionately in love, so within 3 months, Nick had proposed, and we got married really quickly. It wasn't long after I got married, I got pregnant, and Nick and I had been pretty excited. When we found out that we were having twins, I had to take a year break from work so I could, well, have the kids without having to be bothered about work. I had gone back to work after a whole year break, and it had not been easy coping with the workload and how things were being handled. It's crazy how much could change in a year. When the twins were barely 2 years old, I got pregnant again, and instead of being happy, I wasn't too pleased. I didn't want to have to take a break from work, but Nick had been supportive. I didn't even have to take any break because he helped through the whole process. I only had to take a 3-month break when I gave birth. It was Nick who decided to cut back on work so he could help with the kids. I needed to focus on my career, and Nick had been very supportive. Years went by, and we settled into a routine. I took care of the kids in the morning before going to work, and Nick dropped them off at school and picked them up later. He cooked them dinner and settled them for the night on nights, which was most nights. I couldn't make it because of my workloads, which I had to stay back most of the time to finish up. Nick was really understanding and never complained once. He would cook me dinner, wait up for me, and even give me a massage while I complained about work stress and all. Nick and I barely even had sex anymore, and to be honest, it had been my fault. I kept having different reasons not to have sex. I was either too tired, or I had work the next morning and I couldn't afford to exert myself, or I was nagging him for being too insensitive. Until Nick stopped asking altogether, but he never refused whenever I tried to ask for sex. but he never tried initiating sex. I think the real reason I stopped trying to have sex was because our marriage wasn't as exciting as it had started. The passion had drizzled out, and what was left was just a poorly managed passion that led to almost nothing but disappointment in the bedroom. I saw sex as a chore, and chores to me were definitely hectic, and I avoided them as much as I could. So I avoided sex with Nick as much as I could. Yes, I initiated sex between us a few times, but mostly because I was horny, and there was no other person available to fill the spot. But we were happy. Or maybe he was happy. Our kids made him laugh, and he always enjoyed spending time with them even more than spending time with me. The kids, too, felt the same way because they hardly even wanted to spend any time with me. They excluded me from their picnics but always went with their father. He knew more about our kids than I did, and to be honest, it was always awkward being with them, so I always avoided being in the house with them. I concentrated more on my work because that at least made me feel less lonely, and it accepted me the way I am. For some reason, our boss had decided to retire and hand over the reins to his younger brother, who had just relocated from another part of the world to our town. Our boss isn't even that old, but he had said he needed to spend more time with family, so there was no convincing him otherwise. We had a new boss. Wills. Wills was a charming young man. He's 28, and he had this charm that would make females squirm and fall in love fast enough with him. I would know because all the young ladies started to talk and call dibs on him. They started wearing tight dresses that showed off their curves just to catch his eyes, and it was ridiculous what they did to get his attention. I didn't at first notice Wills. I mean, he was younger than me, and he was very flirty, and at first sight, he was the kind of guy I avoided even when I was younger. I had always dated the guys I considered safe, and it had always been me who ended things because I was tired of being with them, so I knew automatically that Wills was a bad choice for me, and then there was the fact that I was married with 3 kids. But then Will started to notice me. It started little, and I just shrugged it off as a boss trying to relate with his worker, so I didn't mind at first. Then it continued and increased. He would ask about my work and my weekend, offer to take me out for lunch to discuss work, and then we would end up talking about things that didn't even relate much to work. He was fun and refreshing. He was just what I needed. When I wanted to escape the choking tension in my own home, which I caused, I would accept Will's offer of dinner, and I enjoyed his attention very much. The way he would stare at me like I was saying something interesting rather than the boring things I was actually saying. He made me feel like a woman. The way I would feel his eyes on me when he walked purposely behind me so he could have a full-sized view of my ass. It was rude. I was supposed to consider it rude, but instead it had been appealing to me. I became part of the dress to impress Will's gang. I wore dresses I had always considered too indecent for work because I wanted Wills to look at me like I was sexy. The way Nick had stopped looking a long time ago, I wanted to feel like a woman and not just a failure as a wife and mother. So when Wills had suggested we meet on a weekend and I didn't have to tell anyone just to hang out casually, I had agreed. And I lied to Nick that I had a work thing. He didn't say anything as usual, already used to me not being home most weekends. In fact, most times, I think they like me being away from the house because of how much tension I seem to bring. My kids hardly laughed out loud when I was there. It's like I couldn't do anything right in their eyes. I didn't even know that one of the twins had an allergy to nuts, and I almost fed them nuts on the day I decided to even hang out with them. Luckily, Nick had walked in on us and had removed the food quickly. That's how bad it is between us. I know almost nothing about my kids and my husband. I feel like a stranger to them most times, nearly all the time. So I accepted Will's offer to be away from the house, and I had the best time of my life. He took me out to have the most expensive breakfast in a restaurant that's almost always hard to get a booking for because of how expensive it is. He took me shopping and then to a spa to get a full-body massage. I felt pampered by the end of the night, and Wills had insisted on dropping me home, but I panicked and told him to drop me a few blocks before my house, and he had accepted the offer. Wills kissed me that night before I left his car. I didn't even try to resist. I was beyond seduced by all of his gestures, and when he leaned over and asked if he could kiss me, I only nodded. It felt good to be kissed like that after a long time of feeling like a tenant in my own home. Even Nick's kiss didn't compare to that. His kisses over the years became mandatory, like the old ages where a kiss is mandatory as a greeting. It was plain and ordinary, like a complimentary kiss. It didn't set me on fire like Will's kiss did. I had the urge to undress and allow him to take me right there in his car and not care that I was only some meters away from my home. It didn't take long for that to happen, though. It didn't take long before Wills and I had the opportunity to have the rough and crazy sex I've always dreamt about. It only took a week. It was only the kisses at first, like he was testing grounds to see if he could go further. And when I didn't complain, it continued and developed into heavy making out. He would hold my hands while we had dinner at some fancy restaurant and feather kisses on my hands while we ate. He would drop me off a few meters away from my house and steal a quick kiss before leaving. He would even wink at me when passing by my office, or request to see me in his office just to make empty promises and kiss me while telling me how much he loved kissing me. It was also exciting and thrilling. I felt like a teenager sneaking around, doing drugs or having sex when they're not supposed to. I was a woman again. I felt I was. Or maybe I was a dog in heat. We even started sneaking out of the office under the pretense of work. The first time it had happened was that night at the office. I stayed back because I had a deadline, and I had already called to inform Nick that I was going to be late. He had even offered to come pick me up when I was done, but I refused, and my excuse had been that I brought my car. But the real reason was because I wanted to avoid the discomfort of being with him inside a small car where we had no choice but to talk to, break the awkward silence. So I had chosen the opposite. Wills had come back to the office with a box of pizza and wine in hand and had commanded that I stop working and eat. Since he was my boss, I had no choice. Or rather, I wanted no other choice. So I closed off the laptop and made space to sit and eat. We talked about everything and anything, and we laughed together about silly things. I even talked to him about the tension in my marriage and the difficulties I had bonding with my kids. I don't know why I did that, but I just did. And it had been comforting at that point to share with someone how suffocating my own home felt to me. It wasn't wrong to share with someone how I felt about my family. The only mistake I made was sharing it with the only person I should have stayed very far away from. It started with a touch on the shoulder. The touch had been meant to comfort me, but had instead metamorphosed into something else. And before I could say Jack, Wills and I were already kissing hungrily and tearing at each other's clothes. Wills had me against the desk in my office. My panties were down my legs but not completely off, and my skirt was high up my waist while I was bent against the desk. The only sounds in the room were those of my moaning. I had my first, second, and third orgasm during the whole sex thing because I don't know how Wills did it. But he gave me the best pleasurable experience of my life that evening. When he was done, he just silently wore his clothes and then proceeded to study me while I adjusted mine back. My panties felt slack against my waist, and my vulva felt heavy, as if to say it just had something inside of it moments ago. When he insisted on dropping me off at home, I was the one who leaned over and kissed him, thanking him for the pleasurable evening. That must have encouraged Wills, seeing that I didn't regret what we did or feel guilty about it. I cannot say I regret that moment until now. I only realized too late what I lost when I did lose it. I continued sleeping around with Wills. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. He made me feel all those things I thought I would never feel again with my marriage. And I felt I could have both. I became a perfect liar to both the kids and to Nick. I spent more time out than I did before, and this time it wasn't for work. It was to have rough and dangerous sex with Wills. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt I could have both worlds, and I did. For a while. But it isn't so now. If I had spent more time with my husband, I would have known that he noticed the changes in me. I would have known that he figured out that I wasn't just working anymore. I would have realized that I was ruining my marriage and not saving it. But I was enjoying myself too much to care about the ruins of my marriage. I was going everywhere with Wills. I was his mistress, whom he took with him to important events. Although he never introduced me as his mistress, but as his chief editor whenever we did go to their parties. I felt important because I got to meet important people that I had no chances of meeting on a regular basis. But everything shattered soon enough. Sam and Julia had wanted to celebrate their 5th-year wedding anniversary for some reason. When I heard that, I remembered I had scoffed. Nick and I didn't celebrate our 10th year together. Might probably have been because of the fact that I canceled our dinner at the last minute because I was called at work, but Nick didn't make any attempt to celebrate our 11th year together. And I didn't bother because I was with Wills that day, and we had rented out an entire suite just to spend the weekend together. We even went on a yacht, and everything was so thrilling, and I was happy. I had the perfect life, a home with a husband and kids, A job that was very convenient as well as challenging. A perfect lover. I mean, what more could a woman ask for? I knew I had no excuse not to attend Sam's and Julia's party, so I had no choice but to cancel a dinner date with Will's despite all the spicy promises of sex. I had gone there with the intention of dashing in and out. Despite the fact that Nick and I weren't exactly together, his parents thought very highly of me. They loved me very much, and they thought that I was the one keeping the home and still holding a job, a successful one at that, not Nick. And for some reason, Nick never actually said the truth. And since he didn't, I felt there was no need to either. But Julia, on the other hand, had never really liked me. She was always coming to her brother's defense anytime her parents said anything. She felt her brother was too good for me right from the beginning, and she had always been a little too defensive of her older brother. It is true, though. So I knew we were going to get into some sort of altercation, so I had prepared mentally for it. If I didn't know everything about Julia, I knew that she loved attention a lot. In fact, she enjoyed it when she was the only one concentrated on wherever she went. Perhaps the reason why she never liked me was because I stole her brother's undivided attention from her, and also her parents. So the only way to infuriate her was to steal the attention, especially at her own party. I regret doing that now so much because if I had stayed quiet and just blended in, perhaps I would not be in this mess I am in right now. But I did. I wanted to be loud, so I became loud. I wanted to steal the attention off Julia, and so I did. And now I might be spending the rest of my life regretting what I did. I said playfully that Nick was my loyal puppy, and I've never seen anyone as loyal as he is. But instead of everyone laughing as usual, they just kept quiet, and Julia looked at me with a mixture of disgust and shock. I laughed nervously and tried to soothe the mood, but no one was buying it. And the worst thing had been Nick's silence. He just continued looking at me like some stranger and not his wife. He didn't look like someone who had held me moments ago before the party and kissed me until I felt dizzy. He didn't look like the man who had looked into my eyes with a smile on his lips and his hands in my hair, smoothing it over, and had said softly into my ears, "I love you, and you and our kids mean the world to me." He looked hurt, and knowing who Nick was, he didn't like confrontation, so I thought he was going to reserve his hurt speech till we got home. But I got the shock of my life moments after. After the whole awkward moment, everyone had gone back to chatting and doing something else. And while everyone was at the table, chatting and laughing, Nick had snorted. He didn't just snort. He snorted really loudly, and the snort was followed by a bitter laugh, like he heard something funny, but also sad. Everyone kept quiet and looked at him, surprised by what he did, because everyone knew that Nick tried as much as possible to draw less attention to himself wherever he went. In fact, he hated when people recognized him because he was that shy. But surprisingly, Nick had not even minded that people were paying attention to him. He just smiled and raised a toast. He had first raised a toast to the couple to wish them a happy anniversary, but he hadn't just stopped there. Nick had smiled and faced me, and he had said, and I quote, "I'll raise a toast to my beautiful wife who thought I had no knowledge of her cheating spree with her boss." I was so shocked, and for some reason, instead of defending myself or coming up with an excuse or something, I just stood there staring at Nick. He looked at me too, as if daring me to deny it, as if he was challenging me to lie at that moment. He looked so sure that he knew what he was talking about. And at that moment, I just panicked. Instead of groveling and begging for forgiveness, instead of blaming the devil and just asking for a second chance, I stood there, and the next thing that came out of my mouth was, "It's your fault." Nick didn't look shocked as the rest of the group. He just smiled and agreed with me. He said he agreed because the moment he found out that I was cheating, he should have never kept quiet about it. He should have not hoped that one day I'd realize just what it was I was doing and that I would confess my sins and beg for forgiveness. And he would forgive me, and we would be a happy couple again. He told me there that he knew about the text message I got from my boss the evening prior to that event, thanking me for the previous 3 nights. The trip I had lied to Nick about, saying it was a work trip. He had known. He knew everything and yet kept quiet. But I guess calling him a loyal puppy broke every level of patience he had for me. Nick announced right there that he was going to get a divorce, and he wanted full custody of our kids. The worst thing was that everyone agreed with him. Sam even offered to be his lawyer. Julia looked at me in disgust. She never really liked me anyway. Nick's and Julia's parents just shook their heads as if pitying me, and everybody else looked at me like I was some evil monster spoken about in a children's storybook. I still have not been able to process what is happening to this date, because it happened so fast at the party. One moment, everyone was having fun, and the next moment, all of my secrets were exposed in front of everyone. I did the first thing that came to my mind when I saw how everyone was suddenly turning against me. I ran. I ran fast. I didn't take the car because Nick had been the one who drove us there. I didn't bother to call Uber because that meant I had to wait for its arrival if I'm lucky there's one in the area. So I just ran. I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. I couldn't breathe any longer. The air was suddenly toxic for me. Luckily, after running a few miles away from Sam's and Julia's home, I was able to hail down a taxi, and I had asked that he drive me home. Without thinking about it, I had gone back home, to the home Nick and I had built for the past 11 years. I wanted to hide away from the whole thing. The shame, the disgust, and worst of them all had been the look on Nick's face as he expressed himself. He looked like a wounded lion, and it had hurt me so badly. After the whole disaster happened and I ran away. Nick didn't show up at the house until the second day. The kids were with his mom because we had planned that they would spend the weekend with their grandparents prior to the event. Nick had shown up and he had met me in the kitchen. He just looked at me, not with love this time, but with something else. Something I cannot even pinpoint. His eyes were just dark, almost like they were filled with emptiness. Nick had not said anything to me. He just walked past me and picked up a drink. Then, without saying anything, he went into our room. I felt like it was my perfect chance to fix everything, so I went after him and knelt down to apologize for everything while crying and trying to explain why I felt the need to cheat. Nick had just sat there and listened to me. When he wouldn't say anything, I went close to him and tried to grab his hand, but he moved so quickly like something had burnt him. Or rather, in this case, my touch had burnt him. He moved further into the room and just said something that will probably stay with me forever and haunt me. There's nothing to forgive. There are only things to move on from. Mine is you. I knew right there that Nick was done with me. He didn't want me anymore. He didn't want us to work anymore. He just wanted to move on with his life, work, the kids, but without me. He left the house after he made the statement and packed a bag, probably to stay at his parents' place with the kids. I do not want to use the word doom, but I really think I'm doomed. Nick doesn't want me anymore, and I cannot even fight for us because I repeatedly took advantage of every opportunity he gave me to do so. Now he's not giving me any chance to fight for us anymore, and I feel like I'm underwater trying to come up for air. I'm desperate. I'm so desperate. I cannot accept Nick's choice. I cannot lose him or the kids, and I'm willing to do anything to make things right between us again. I recognize that I'm the one at fault and that I did the stupidest thing by cheating. I realize just how wrong I am. But is there really no chance of making up for everything I've done? Is there really no means of getting back my family? Guys, please. What do I do? Update. Hello, Redditors. It's been a while since I last posted. It's been roughly 3 weeks since my whole life literally came crashing down. And within those 3 weeks, I can say I've successfully seen the worst of life. And the funny thing is, just when I think this is the worst thing that could happen to me, another one happens that makes me think that maybe the other ones were better. My life right now is the exact definition of hell on earth. First, it was the people at that party who knew about my horrible actions against my marriage, but somehow that information had spread. It spread so fast that my mom was calling and crying 4 days after the event, calling me a disappointment. And my father apparently never wants to see me again because I'm a disgrace to the family. I cannot even blame them. I would ban me too from coming around if I happened to be an outsider in the case. Sadly enough, I'm the perpetrator and not the victim. I brought everything upon myself. My friends who once admired me and would always beg me for tips on how to be in a marriage and keep it started withdrawing. First, it was the missed calls, then the several excuses not to come around me. And then it was my husband insists that we stop our friendship because of what you did. Or, people cannot see us together because they would think I am also cheating on my husband. Then it was fake sympathy. They would call to check up on me and see how I was doing. Eventually, even that stopped, and now I'm all alone. My children didn't even bother arguing about who they wanted to stay with. They chose their father even before the judge asked for their opinions. The court ruled in favor of Nick because I was the unfaithful and absent mother and wife in our relationship. I was the woman who chose a man over her own family. And I thought perhaps I still had work to look up to, but someone had anonymously dropped off evidence of my affair with Will's, and I had been asked to resign so it wouldn't look bad on the company for firing me. It's bad enough that I have to deal with the fact that my family, both nuclear and extended, don't want me. But I had to take the blame for everything that happened between Will's and me. Will's lied. He maintained the stand that I seduced him and lied to him that my husband and I were separated for years. He literally used me. All the romantic getaways and dinners, the pickups and drop-offs, all of it had just been a lie. I should have known. I should have known that no cheating would last forever and that I would probably not get out of it without any scars. I should have just tried to work things out with Nick. I could have delegated duties and spent more time with my family. I could have discussed how I was feeling about our communication and sex lives with Nick and suggested that we do therapy together. Because that's what married couples do. They see a problem and they tackle it together. But instead, I had ignored my problem until it became too large and occupied the largest part of my home. I made my children see me as a workaholic mother that couldn't help with their assignments, read bedtime stories, or cook them dinner. I made them see me as an unreliable mother whose whole life revolved around work, one who didn't show up for Parents' Day or Sports Day or even picnics. I made them feel like I didn't love them or care enough to try and make things work between us. I've ruined my life with my own hands. I should never have tried cheating. I should have tried working things out with Nick. He gave me so many chances, and each one of them I threw back in his face. I'm all alone in this world. Utterly alone. And I cannot even begin to express just how awful that makes me feel. It feels so terrible that I only now think of all the solutions I could have given to the problems in my home. If only I hadn't been so stupid as to think I was the only unhappy person in my marriage. And in my quest for happiness, I ruined my only perfect way of being happy. Forever. My heart hurts badly when I think about all the ways in which I've ruined myself. My head is like a broken recorder replaying all the times I could have done something about my marriage. All the opportunities I had to fix things that I didn't. My head keeps replaying the affair, and instead of the usual thrill I felt when I usually recall all the times that Wills and I were together, I felt disgusted. I felt disgusted remembering the feel of his hand on my skin and his lips on mine, and I felt ashamed too. Of all the times I've allowed him to touch me in ways I had never allowed Nick to, because I felt it was the proper way of treating one's wife. It's hard to bear. The pain is unbecoming. I feel choked up, particularly because I'm not even used to this small space. The small apartment I had to rent for a cheap price because I couldn't afford to rent anything higher. I also had debts because I have to pay Nick child support as commanded by the court. My life is on a very shaky basis now, and as each day passes by, I feel like I'm slipping even further into this darkness that encompasses my life now. Update. Hello, Reddit. This is my final post here. Writing has not helped me in any way. I thought it would make me feel better penning down my feelings that no one in the world seems to care about anymore, including you guys. I see all the shades being thrown at me, and to be honest, I don't even care. Because losing my family has been the greatest shade ever thrown at me, so others feel little compared to the loss I'm going through. It's been another 3 weeks, making a total of 6 weeks altogether. 6 weeks since I said those stupid words. Comparing my husband, my ex, to a loyal puppy, well, he sure made me eat my words. Nick is no puppy. He's a lion, the king of the jungle, who protects his pride from other predators, and he definitely is protecting them against any danger right now. The danger in this context being me. He's protecting our kids from me. I'm the toxic one. I'm the one who tried to ruin our family, and Nick has put me out for it. I regret everything I did. I wish so terribly that I could turn back the hands of time and undo the wrongs I've done, but life sure serves revenge while it is very hot and can burn. It doesn't go without saying karma is surely a bitch. I got what I deserved, and now I'm going to pay for my sins for the rest of my life, without a husband, without my children, without a home to call mine, without Nick, and that sure as hell doesn't paint a pain-free future. Bye, guys. Hope you don't end up on the other side as I have, because I could tell you for free that it sure isn't sweet being here. Goodbye again.